Hey guys, let's get straight to the point. Today we're going to talk about why the Canon 60 Mark I is still worth it and how much I enjoy using this camera in the past month. The first reason is, of course, image quality. This is the most important thing that I look for when I am looking at a camera, because with good image quality, I can kind of ignore some of the quirks and some of the cons of a camera, even if it's, let's say, heavy or bulky or hard to use. So image quality is really, really important, and the 60 Mark I has incredible image quality. Straight out of camera, JPEGs are already really, really good, and I'm probably going to share on the screen with you guys my settings and also the color profile that I use on the Canon 60 Mark I in order to get the JPEGs that are like straight out of the camera. But my favorite part is I love editing the raw photos on the Canon 60 Mark I. I've used Sony cameras, Panasonic, Fujifilm cameras. I think the closest to Canon's raw color science is Fujifilm cameras. Sony is really, really not easy to edit a raw file because all the colors are kind of off, especially yellow and greens. With Canon and Fujifilm, the colors are accurate, so you have a really good base in order for you to create the look that you want. So with a good base, so you don't have to spend time trying to fix the color before you create the colors you want. And Canon's colors are probably the most natural that I've used in the past. So the raw files on the Canon 60 Mark I is so good. Like, the colors are accurate. All you need to do is to add in contrast and saturation, and you have a really good base. And when you try to adjust the colors to make the creative look that you want, it's really good. The files are really rugged. I don't remember how many bits the Canon 60 Mark I photos are. I think only medium format Fujifilm has 16-bit colors, but it's definitely good enough. You can push the colors, you can use the HSL slider to push the colors of different channels, saturation, brightness, and it will probably be fine even if you push it to the limits. The only thing is when you're adjusting exposure, I notice in the raw file, if you go overexpose to certain points, some colors might break and it will turn into pure white. So if you push the exposure higher and you start seeing some color fading into pure white, definitely go back into the HSL channel to turn down the brightness or the luminance of that color in order to preserve that color. That's what I noticed. You might be able to see in some of the photo samples. Besides the color science, the in focus and out of focus roll off, it's really, really smooth. What that means is the in focus area and out of focus area, the edge or the edges, they are not super sharp, so you don't see the subject popping out of the image or the background like a 3D cutout. I hate that. I don't like that, no matter if it's photos or videos. Once you edit raw, I didn't have to do anything because I only use the Mac Photos app to edit my photos. It's free. And I don't see that 3D pop or 3D cutout, so it looks really, really natural. You can see that the subject is still blend into the background, so it doesn't look like you copy and paste that subject onto the background. I really, really don't like that effect. The last thing about the image quality out of the 60 Mark I is the megapixels. It has a 20 megapixel sensor, if I'm correct. Definitely more than enough for a lot of things nowadays, especially if you're just viewing your images on a smaller device or a smaller display like a phone or a tablet. But this is 20 megapixels. You can definitely crop and use the image, resize it or any way you want, and it will still be absolutely fine. The second reason why the 60 Mark I is still worth it is, of course, the price. Old DSLRs, now they're getting a little bit more expensive because people are chasing after those sensors, but they are still much more affordable compared to mirrorless cameras. My 60 Mark I got it from a camera store, so it's a little bit more expensive than buying from a private seller, but that's okay because I love those people at the camera store. I just want to support them, and also they always sell me high quality stuff, so I can guarantee that this camera is in a good working condition. So I got this camera, the body, for around $500, and then they sold me the lens, the 50mm f1.8 STM Canon lens, for like 80 bucks. So this combination is less than $600, and you can definitely do some professional work out of this camera or this setup by itself. Definitely look into it because of its price. You can probably get it cheaper on eBay, but check the condition, make sure that you have the return policy or the guarantee in place in order to get the camera, because you can't really see the camera or test it in person. That's why I highly recommend going to an actual camera store, try out different camera bodies. But the 60 Mark I, I got this combination from a camera store and it's still super cheap. The third reason is the handling of these cameras. Older DSLR cameras has way better grip, to be honest with you. Yes, the newer Canon cameras, if you get the R5, R6 Mark II, R3, they all have nice grip, but this camera grip is still better than a lot of those, because you can see that there's like a little bit of like a curvature on the grip here. The latest or the newer mirrorless cameras, they usually have a really flat grip on the side here, like here, and that it's fine. The grip can still be big, but then it doesn't curve into your hand like a glove, but this one does. The 60 Mark I and all the 5Ds, they all have these kind of grips. So this helps a lot if you are using this camera for a long time during the day, especially if you're having like a heavier lens. This grip is gonna help you a lot. The next reason is the screen of the 60 Mark I. Yes, I know this is a really old camera and it does not have a flippy or a tilty screen. It's a fixed display in the back of the camera. A lot of people will hate it because you can't take selfie, you can't take like lower angle like photos, but then I'm talking about the quality of the screen. It's not the best, but you can actually still use it because it's still really sharp and clear. The colors is the most important thing. They are accurate to a point that they're not only accurate compared to the final result, but they're accurate actually compared to iPhone, iPad screens. When I compare the screen on the 60 Mark I with my iPhone screen, I compare the photos side by side, they are so close. The colors are super close, the contrast is super close. I was surprised. So that is a really big advantage using the 60 Mark I screen. Another reason why the 60 Mark I is still worth it is, of course, the battery life. Battery life on DSLR cameras are super long compared to mirrorless cameras. Yes, the mirrorless cameras give you a lot of technology advantages, really good autofocus and like all the film simulations and stuff. But then if you just want to take photos for a longer period of time, DSLR cameras can definitely take a lot more photos. We're talking about like maybe a couple hundred photos more per one battery. So that's a really big advantage. Even with my 60 Mark I has an older battery, it's not like fully charging as before already, but it still allows me to take like 500, 600, 700 photos easily. That is because it doesn't have an EVF, it has an OVF. So a lot of things actually help the camera to preserve the battery, to have a longer battery life for you to take more photos. Besides the battery life, the file sizes are really small as well. I have a small SD, not small SD card, but then when I use the same SD card on my other cameras, it will usually give me like 800 or 900 photos. But on this camera, I can take like RAW plus JPEG for 1,600 photos per one SD card. I'm still on the same SD card when I first format the SD card in this camera, and I'm only like down like 700 photos. I still have like almost 1,000 photos available on this camera, and that's crazy. I've never seen this before. The raw file sizes are small, but then they are still really rugged. So definitely look into this. It will save you some space on your computer and also on your camera if you need to take a lot of photos on the same day. And that's a big plus compared to latest and greatest mirrorless cameras. Next thing is the build quality. The Canon 60 Mark I is a really rugged camera. It feels heavy, yes, it's definitely a lot heavier than a lot of mirrorless cameras. It's bigger, but it's built like a tank, to be honest with you. I think the metal is much thicker compared to the newer cameras. Even my Fujifilm X Pro 2 doesn't feel as heavy duty as the Canon 60 Mark I. The top plate, I believe, is made out of plastic. You can actually see it and feel it. But then after the top plate, the whole body is metal. And it's really, really rugged. I can see the metal almost by the scratches at the bottom by the previous owners. And it's still fine. It's so rugged. I can see the metal silver underneath. It makes me feel like yeah, it's not gonna break that easily compared to the latest mirrorless cameras. But don't try it. Don't try to break it. And I am confident that this is going to last a long time, besides the shutter failing and stuff like that. But the body itself, super rugged. The next reason is lens options. With DSLR cameras, especially Canons, they have really, really good EF lenses. The system, the ecosystem is really, really well developed because it's been around for so long. You can easily pick up like great lenses at a much more reasonable price. And that is a plus because a lot of newer cameras, especially Canon cameras, the RF mount, it's great, absolutely amazing. But then the lenses are really expensive or really cheap, but low quality. The good lenses are usually super expensive and they're usually really big for the good reason. They want higher quality like images out of the lens. Of course, the glass is gonna be super heavy. The lenses are big on the RF mount. Whenever I see someone holding up like a mirrorless Canon camera, all I can pay attention at is the lens. It's huge. Like if we're talking about the 85 f1.2, I think, that's huge. That's like a big, I think the lens itself is heavier than the setup. If you want to put it on a gimbal, it's gonna be super heavy. So advantage, so many good EF lenses, and also you have third-party lenses. Now, I don't know if Canon is gonna allow people to make RF lenses again, but then Sigma has really good lens. I am looking into getting the 35 f1.4 from Sigma for this camera, but I'm still thinking about it because I kind of am okay with this setup right now. But you get all the third-party lenses and also EF lenses are way cheaper. The last reason why I think the Canon 60 Mark I is still worth it is the learning curve. This camera is old. I think it came out 2012 and it's been a long time and everything is kind of still not as advanced as nowadays all the newer cameras has. So the process of taking photos with this kind of cameras, it's going to be a little bit slower. You don't have face detect autofocus, you don't have eye detect, you don't have animal detect, you have a focus box, like a focus box in the center. All the focus boxes outside of the center point is pretty much useless. It's like, I don't know if it's like contrast based. It hunts and then it will take like a couple of seconds in order to focus if you're using like the focus points outside of the center one. The center one is the fast one. Don't worry about it. You can focus, recompose, and take a photo. But it's still really, really slow, especially if you don't have an EVF. You use the OVF, you will get used to it, but it's still really clunky. You will see exactly what you're looking through the lens. It's not an electronic viewfinder. So what that means is you will see it really clearly of what you're gonna take pictures of, but at the same time, you can't really judge the exposure. It's not gonna show you. It has a needle, not a needle, but it has a display to show you if your image is overexposed or not. But then compared to EVF, it's just a reflection. And a lot of times I have hard time finding the center focus point because like I'll be like putting up the EVF or the OVF on my face and try to look through it, and then I'll be like, where is the focus point? I have to kind of like half press the shutter in order to make that focus point blink like a red light in order to find it, because it's a huge like OVF. So sometimes you will have a hard time finding a center focus point, but you just get used to it. And also because the focus point in the center, you will have to focus and recompose. A lot of times if you just focus and take a picture, your image will end up having too much headroom because like you're literally like moving the focus point a lot higher than most pictures I take, at least. If you're taking a picture of someone in a landscape mode, especially if your focus point is on their face, once you focus and take a picture, you still have a lot of headroom because the focus point is in the middle. You actually have to focus, lower the camera, and then take a picture in order to have the composition that you probably want, like a 2/3 to fill the screen, because if you take the picture with the person's head in the middle, it'll be half and half because the focus point is in the middle. Same thing with taking a portrait photo. In a portrait orientation, the focus point is in the middle, so you have to focus and then lower the camera. That's just something that you need to get used to. But then the learning curve of using a DSLR is really, really good. I wish I start taking photos with a DSLR instead of mirrorless cameras because I got spoiled by all the latest and greatest technology, face detection, eye detection, like EVF and refresh rate, like high refresh rate, like screens and stuff like that. So I can just point the camera at the subject and then just press the shutter button and the camera will do the autofocus and everything for me. I think everyone should start off with a clunkier device or a clunkier setup so you can get to learn all the basics, all the photography basics. Once you can handle using an older and slower camera, I'm pretty sure it's much easier to jump into like a newer and more advanced camera with better technology. So that's just me, but the learning curve is definitely a pro on the DSLR camera, especially the 60 Mark I. Okay, now I'm just gonna quickly talk about some of the cons of getting the 60 Mark I compared to getting a newer mirrorless digital camera. It's really, really slow and heavy. As I said before, the process of taking photos using a DSLR is much slower. You have to kind of like look at the OVF, take a photo, and then look at the picture and make sure that everything looks good, and then do it over and over again. That's gonna take a longer time to get the pictures you want compared to a mirrorless camera, but that's also the fun part of it, the learning curve, as I said. It's heavy. The body itself is really, really heavy compared to a mirrorless camera because a mirrorless camera does not have a lot more, like compared to the DSLR, it doesn't have the mirrors and stuff. So the components probably are less, and newer technology, the battery and stuff like that, they can be lighter than the previous DSLR cameras. But it's actually not a bad thing because the body is heavier. That way I feel more balanced with like the grip because the weight is kind of back onto my grip instead of having like a mirrorless camera with a light body, but the lenses are heavy, especially the RF lenses. I much prefer having a heavier body but lighter lenses, if that makes any sense. Just try it in a camera store and you'll be able to tell which one you like the most. If you like holding onto the lens with your left hand or the other hand, then by all means, that might help. But then the weight of the DSLR actually helps me, but not a lot of people will like it. As I said before, it does not have an EVF. I'm still trying to get used to it. It doesn't like give you what you're gonna get in the viewfinder, and that's kind of annoying because sometimes I enjoy using mirrorless cameras because I can just take a photo and still see the preview or the playback in the EVF. That way I don't need to go like take a photo, look at it, take a photo, look at it. So I can stay on the EVF and keep taking photos. So that's gonna slow down your process as well. But then OVF, another good thing is sometimes EVFs, they can't really display what you're actually looking at, especially if it's overexposed or underexposed, like in the environment. So in a darker environment, you can see easily with an OVF. In a overexposed environment, you can still see easily with the OVF because your eyes has better dynamic range than the display. Talking about the OVF, it does not have auto switch. So when you put the camera onto your face, it's not going to switch to the EVF. There is pros and cons of this kind of setup. The pros is, of course, it's faster, so it does not have to wait till the EVF kicks in. But the cons is, as I said before, no exposure display on the OVF. It will look perfectly exposed because it's your eyes doing the exposure looking at the OVF. But for me, it's kind of a disadvantage because I was spoiled by the EVF on a lot of newer cameras. Besides being slow, these cameras are also really, really loud. Everything is really tactile and loud, if you will. When you're trying to take a photo with a DSLR, there's a mirror and a shutter. So the mirror has to like slap and then the shutter. So this is how loud it is. So that's how loud it is. It has a silent mode, but it's actually not that silent. It's a little bit quieter, but not as quiet as no sound, which a lot of mirrorless cameras can do. They use electronic shutter, so the shutter doesn't even like close. So mechanical shutter is still good, but then it's just super loud. But a lot of people actually like these sounds. Yeah, so there's plus and minus or advantage, disadvantage of using a mechanical shutter or on a mirror camera or a DSLR camera. For me, it's actually a little too loud, but like you just get used to it. Just you can't really use it in a really quiet environment compared to a mirrorless camera, but it's still really fun. The last disadvantage of using a DSLR camera compared to newer cameras is there's no auto continuous focus or like auto detection of faces and eyes, animals, train, car, planes, anything like that. Nothing. There's a focus box. As I said before, you can only focus with the box, compose, take the photo. A lot of people really like the newer cameras because of that, because it's much easier. You don't really need to do anything almost, even if it's for wildlife. Yes, I can totally understand it. If it's for wildlife, the moments you can't really miss them, so you should use a system that can focus by itself like super quickly, because sometimes they move really fast, they're not gonna stay there for you to focus on it. But then if you're doing like street photos or portrait photos or like landscape photos mainly, then I highly recommend you to try to use a simple system to train your focus point kind of composition like skills, instead of relying on a camera that has like super good autofocus, because you're basically just pressing the button. Like it's gonna focus on the subject no matter what. I don't like that kind of technology all the time, at least, like depends on the job. But then, yes, I enjoy using the autofocus box and then recomposing. That's more fun to me. That's part of the excitement of photography. Sometimes your photo is out of focus, but it's still really nice to look at because of the flaw. So definitely look into it, but autofocus definitely not going to be advanced. But most of the DSLRs, they only have autofocus boxes. No auto detect, no nothing. That's it. Those are the reasons why the Canon 60 Mark I DSLR camera is worth it. I think it's a really, really great camera, especially if you're just starting, because the image quality is super good. You get to play with the raw photos that are really rugged, that you can pretty much do anything to the image to create the look that you want. And also the tactile feelings and all the learning curves really, really is going to help you to grow as a photographer. Let me know in the comment section below if you are still using a DSLR camera, or if you're planning to get a DSLR camera instead of a mirrorless camera. Or if you have your mirrorless camera that you really love using, let me know in the comment section below and I'll definitely check them out. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.